the March 12th Trips and Traps. Andy Sterling, Richard Migliori.
I like the races we got today because some of them are subtle trips, and I like when we can point out things that maybe get overlooked, and then there's one that's not so subtle a trip.
Yeah, I thought there was a few things to look at. We obviously raced only the 2 days last weekend, but particularly Sunday, but also Saturday, I think it was one of those days where the rail was pretty strong, and it wasn't obvious because you weren't seeing a lot of these sort of, horses rolling off on the front end per se, but I believe, especially in the Gotham, being inside for a portion of the race was very important.
Yeah, well, we saw the eventual winner save a lot of ground and then swing out when he needed room and finish, but I agree with you. At 3/4 of the race, he was on the rail.
Yeah, as where a lot of horses did well, and some of the horses we'll point out were towards the outside, but we're going to start out, we're going to talk about a maiden race, the 7th race from Saturday, Gotham Day, and we want to look at a couple of horses. One of them was a hot firster. You see Bobble a little bit at the start, and it seems like that was the tone for him, Richie, as he was a bit green. And then keep your eye on the horse in the pink towards the outside, 105-1 first-time starter, who in my opinion ran perhaps the best race of anybody in finishing third here. I think you want the 5 to improve going forward, but Ulations ran very well.
Well, especially what you're saying about the way the track was playing. He never got any opportunity to save ground at all. He was at least 3 to 4 wide the entire turn.
No, I agree. I like that Fernando Jara has been aggressive here. There were times I wished he was a little more aggressive, but overall, I think his aggression has paid off, and I believe that's why he's ridden fairly well this winter. He gets him in the game. He doesn't let him drift out of there and lose his position, but he is chasing wide the whole way. The 5 Rectify, who Richie will talk about quite a bit, this just seems like a horse that, I know they bet him, but he needed a race.
Well, I think he showed that he has ability from his morning workouts, but now he's confronted with a completely different set of circumstances, getting hit with dirt in his face. And you're going to see here, he's going to kind of steady a little bit, like he ducked in or he's trying to lug in. And you'll see in the stretch, Junior Alvarado takes him a long time to get him out from behind the kickback, and it looks like he's not going anywhere, Andy, until he gets out in the clear.
Yeah, I mean, he's lugging in even there. And obviously, Junior, who's riding tremendously, wants to get him outside. And by the way, let's not totally miss the great ride Manny Franco gave on the winner here. You can't ride a horse better than him. What I like about Ulations is, forgetting about all this, he never gives up. I mean, he's still digging in at the end, and he's only inches away from actually finishing second here. And Rectify, yeah, look, he's a Bill Mott horse that was bet in his first start. He's the one who's probably going to move forward and do better. But let's not just completely forget a horse like Ulations because of his lower profile connections. He's not going to be a short price next time, and he ran very well.
No, he ran very well. The interesting thing, though, is Rectify saw so many different situations, got the kickback, was in behind horses, probably learned a lot more out of this race, where Ulations was always in the clear. If he doesn't get off well, or he doesn't have a better post position, or an outside draw, I should say, and he gets kicked back, is he going to react negatively because he's never experienced that yet?
Well, that's actually a very interesting point, and I think it's what you want a lot from first-time starters, and I think it's one of the things we can try to do in this show, and these are more obvious horses, but as you go on, you get to Saratoga, and the 2-year-olds are running, you want horses that get in a little trouble behind that might finish 6th or 7th, but you see those little runs from them, those little moves at times, but they're inhibited by the fact that they're facing things they've just never seen before.
Well, exactly, and then you know they'll do it better the second time and even the third time, so when you see that a horse has some run and is faced with a situation that you know they've never been faced with before, even if in the morning they've schooled behind horses, it's nothing like the afternoon when you have several horses throwing mud back at them.
It's amazing what they can learn. A horse like Rectify, he'll probably break sharper in his second start, he'll have more speed, he'll be a more professional horse. He's also a horse they may end up on the turf with as well because of his pedigree. Once again, we're going to go over the Gotham, and I mean, you can talk a lot about the great ride that CC Lopez gave. We want to talk about a few other horses that were compromised a bit. First of all, at the start, Classy Class breaks about a half-length slow. Thought the rider did a very good job of getting in position after that, though I know Richie wants to say some things later. The 5 Lieutenant Colonel gets left, and he's out of position every step of the way. Tensider, because of his running style and his outside post, he never gets a chance, and you like to talk about this, to save any ground. Both these horses are wide on both turns.
Yeah, and first let's talk about Lieutenant Colonel. Basically, his race was over 2 strides out of the gate. He has no chance. He's never been in behind horses. Now he's caught wide because he gets a little keen with Kendrick Carmouche. He has absolutely no position, no chance, and it was all because of the break. So anytime someone talks about, well, early in a race, maybe it doesn't mean as much, Go to this race and you'll see what a start actually means to a horse.
There's no question about it. And neither one of us is saying that we believe Lieutenant Colonel was going to win this race. But there's no way you can judge his talent against this field, and it's all because of what happened at the start. He was never able to recover from it. I mean, he's behind Tensendur, who had an outside post from him, and you know the 5 has speed. I thought Kendrick Carmouche, what else is he supposed to do? And at least if you're like Lieutenant Colonel, you can say, well, he made a nice big wide run in the race before understandably tiring. He didn't show absolutely nothing.
No, he actually did show some run, and then he flattened out, and he had every right to. I mean, basically, you have to put a line through it. I think now we get to Tensendur, who, to me, is a bit of a grinder, a bit one-pace. The outside draw didn't help him, and he kind of kept coming steady, and he was wide both turns.
Well, that's the thing. In the stretch, he's out here. Lieutenant Colonel's made a bit of a run. Classy Class, who lost his position, the eventual winner. The winner's just faster, though, than him in some ways, but he lost the position. Is Tensendur the kind of horse that will be better at Belmont Park, where the one turn, the wide turn, he won't be punished by his running style?
Oh, I think he'd be much better at Belmont, where he can just kind of make that kind of grinding, sustained kind of run and won't be as important to have that kind of position that you need on the inner track.
He's not going to be compromised because dynamics, while dynamics can always be important, they're so much more important on the inner track, and he's habitually hurt by them.
Yeah, exactly. And the inner track is so much more important to get that position and save ground somewhere, and his style just isn't conducive to that. Let's talk about Classy Class quickly, who ran really well. I thought Junior did a great job getting position after not breaking particularly well and getting inside of El Kabir into the turn. He broke inside of him, but he could have had that position taken away. When he got to the backside, though, Junior allowed him to float off the rail. El Kabir took his vacated spot, and then he wound up having to follow him. Now, I don't think he could beat El Kabir, and I think he flattened out a bit late regardless. But it's just funny when you watch the trip how they swap positions down the backstretch.
Let me ask you a question to play a slight devil's advocate on this. Junior's thinking probably, I've got horse, I'm riding one of the favorites, I don't want to get trapped down on the inside. You know, he sees the Mott horse in front of him. That horse was a 5.5 furlong winner his first time out. Maybe he's thinking, if I get out of the 2-path, I'm going to get options. It just didn't work out in this case.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm not trying to be hard on him,
right,
because if I'm in his position, I'm looking at Toasting Master, who's almost 50-1 in front of me, and the Mott horse that's only had one sprint. I'm thinking, you know what, this isn't a great place to be. I'm going to try to find my place where I can go forward when I need to. It didn't work out that way, but at least there was a thought process behind it. I don't mind riders making mistakes if they're thoughtful mistakes. When they make mindless mistakes, that's when you get frustrated.
I agree, and I think that's why Junior's riding so well. He is thinking. He's 2 steps ahead of where he is in the race by thinking about that beforehand. And you're thinking, you got a big bunch field. When the pace comes back on the turn, if I'm down the rail, Nightmare City. So he gave himself an opportunity. It didn't work out, and ultimately, he rode the second best horse in here.
Oh, I agree with that. Absolutely, I agree with that. It's interesting, we talk about great riders, and of course Jerry Bailey is always going to be a part of that conversation. One of the things that made Jerry Bailey great was he always tried to hold as many options open to himself as possible. If he could hold 2 or 3 lanes, he was going to hold 2 or 3 lanes. Basically, that's what Junior was trying to do.
Yeah, and it just, in this case, I think a horse having more horse, too. It took the eventual winner, who was also just better than he was, to make it happen. We're going to take a look at a race. We want to talk about a number of things from the 6th race on Sunday, March 8th. And one of the things we're going to talk about, you see the aggressive ride there on the horse in green. I want to talk about how he gets involved in shutting horses off towards the inside, particularly the 2 Night at the Opera, but even the 1 Go Get the Basil. And also lost in all this, the 10 This Hard Land was hurt by dynamics. He was wide the whole way. The rail was good. The pace held together in this race. He had a no-shot trip. He's set up to run well on the 1-turn races on the main track.
Well, he's very much in the mold of like Tensendur, where he's just kind of a big galloping horse. He never really got any kind of position, and then of course we saw the mess to the inside of him.
Yeah, we're going to leave this stop for a second. What happens is, and we're going to see it, so we'll talk about the head on the horse in green, One in Your Pocket. He comes over and he tightens things up badly on both the 2, frankly, who stayed in the race in here. Yeah, I'll clear it. Wild Night at the Opera, and the 1 also Go Get the Basil. They're both victimized by this, and I frankly thought that Ruben Silveira did a lot of things wrong in this race.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I know some people look at this race and say, well, the outside horses were coming over. The natural flow of a race into a 2-turn race, into the first turn, is for horses to fold over. His horse didn't jump with it. He was riding him aggressively to go forward. Now, if you're going to go forward at that point, because 2 horses inside of you have established inside position, you had better be sure, and this is is Jockey 101, that you can hold those outside horses that are going to put pressure on you off of those two guys. You have a responsibility.
You're a protector, essentially.
Absolutely. You have a responsibility to the two guys inside of you because they have no place to go.
Right.
There's a rail there. Someplace they're gonna get messed up, and he did not protect them, not one stride.
No, it really seems to be the case, and we're going to show you the head-on later. Also, I felt when aggressively riding for position, he had a chance. I mean, here he is pumping away out in the 3 or 4 path. Wild Night at the Opera, I don't think he ever recovered what happened inside. This hard land is doomed to that wide trip. And once again, keep in mind the dynamics. Nobody gained any ground this race. The other thing was he rushed to get this position. He came over. He had a chance when they hit the backstretch on Money in Your Pocket to tuck in right behind the leaders, the perfect spot to be in, and instead he decided to stay out in the middle of the track. Well, first of all, why'd you do what you did in the beginning of the race if you're going to stay out in the middle of the racetrack? And also, because of the way the racetrack was playing and dynamics, he would have been so much better suited in general to have done that.
Well, that's the hard thing to understand here. You basically wiped 2 horses out to get to that spot, and then as soon as you could, you vacated that spot. So, you know, you've got to make a decision where you want to be. The horse ran well, especially after being wide. And also, it's really hard to quantify how much that takes out of horses, the horse that's the offender as well as the victim.
Well, that's a good point. He, too, has got caught up in it a little bit, and you do wonder, and both the 1 and 2, if you're fans of the 1 and 2, I think you can give them another chance here. The one's coming out a little bit. Poor Wild Night at the Opera gets bounced around then. Testosterone, the rider's taking back. It's almost like he senses what may be going on here. But, Richie, keep your eye on that horse in green.
Yeah, and you can see there's separation between him and the horse to his outside in the light blue. And you see that rider's trying to do the right thing and keep his horse's shoulder on the outside horse to give those guys at least 1 or 2 strides. Obviously, you're not going to babysit them the whole turn.
Right.
But you got to give them at least a few strides to either get all the way up in there or get all the way out of there. You can't just take their ground.
Now, that seemed like a very tough situation, and thankfully nothing ultimately bad happened in the race. And also, you know, I talk about herding. There was enough separation, as you said, between the 4 and I think it was the 5 and 7 outside of him.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Whereas if he had held that position, that wouldn't have happened. Anyway, some things happened in those races. Some things happened in the other races. Some things happen in every race. Let us know. Trips and Traps at NYRAInc.com.